Hey everyone, Nick here from Talking Cardboard, and in this video I'll be going through my top 20 through 11 board games of all time. Now already on our YouTube channel, Corey and John have posted their top 20 through 11 board games of all time, and if you haven't seen those, definitely check those out. What makes Talking Cardboard unique is I think all three of us have very differing board game tastes. I prefer more Ameritrash and cooperative and war games opposed to Corey and John. And with that said, the games you'll see on each of our lists are going to be very different. So it makes it kind of fun then to see all the different types of games that we enjoy. So definitely check out the videos of all three of us. The other thing I want to mention before I get into my top 20 through 11 games is that I unfortunately have not played my top 20 through 11 games very often because I have so many games, as you can see behind me. And with that said, I've also yet to play a lot of the games that I own in my collection. So there are many games that I have that I've yet to play that I think could easily be on my top 20 through 11 list, but I felt it's ethically or morally wrong to put a game on my top list that I've never played yet. So in this video, I may make some comments as to why a game I currently have on my list may either increase or go up higher on my list if I play it more or get more opportunities to play that game, or maybe I'll suggest a game that could replace the game that's currently on the list because I've yet to play the other game that I'm suggesting might kick it off my list if I finally get to play the other game at some point in the future. So just want to say that up front because there's just a lot of games that I have that I really think would be on my list if I simply had played them. So I'll try to weave that into the commentary as I talk about my top 20 through 11 board games of all time. So with that said, let's get things started. Alright, so the number 20 game on my list goes to Battlestar Galactica by Fantasy Flight Games. Now, this game is based on the show Battlestar Galactica, of course. I've actually never watched the show, but I enjoy the game enough that it is on my top 20 list. For those of you that have never heard of this game, Battlestar Galactica is a social deduction game. To start the game, every player is going to be taking on a role of a character that is directly from the show. Each of these characters have slightly different abilities, strengths, and weaknesses. And then you're going to be given a role. Just like any other social deduction game, you're either going to be not a Cylon, which is kind of what you want to be in this game, or you are going to be a Cylon. And for the rest of the game, your mission will be to take down the Battlestar Galactica ship. There's plenty of ways to do that, but there's only one goal of the non-Cylon players, which is to reach this planet Kobo. Why I like this game is because there's so many layers of how the Cylon player can manipulate the game, and because of that, it makes it very, very tricky to really understand who the Cylon players are. I think one of the best parts of the game, though, is halfway through the game, every player gets another identity card, and that means if you started the game as not a Cylon, but then halfway through get a card that says you are now a Cylon, you're now a Cylon for the remainder of the game. Meaning, if you've been trying to help the Battlestar Galactica make its way to Kobo, now you have to change your mindset. And if you get that Cylon, you're now a Cylon card, you have to change your mindset. And, the reality is to win the game, you have to basically start taking back what you've been doing. Typically, that's kind of a good thing because players may not be suspicious of you up until that point if you genuinely were trying to save the ship. So it's starting as a Cylon player may almost be more of a challenge than changing halfway through. But regardless, that's a fun part of this game, which you don't see in a lot of other social deduction games. Long term, I do see that this game will fall off my list at some point, either because another social deduction game will kick it out, or because I'll just want to play another several-hour game that isn't a social deduction game. Typically, this game will play long. A lot of social deduction games play very quickly, but because there's so much going on in this game, as you can see again from this large map with all the dials and action spaces and all the movement around in space, there's a lot going on. It makes this game kind of run on the longer end of the spectrum of games. So I think I might just rather play one of my other longer games that I have in my collection. But with that said, for the time being, Battlestar Galactica does make it in my top 20 because I have played it on many occasions, and every time I play this game, I do have a good time. I don't think I've had a game of this where I was like, man, that was dumb or boring, and I think that's a good reason why it is in my top 20 games of all time. Alright, so the number 19 game on my list goes to Lord of the Rings, the card game by Fantasy Flight Games. This is a living card game, or LCG, and of course has Lord of the Rings IP on it. I have played a little bit of the Arkham Horror LCG game as well as the Marvel Champions LCG, but I do really enjoy the Lord of the Rings, the card game LCG for a variety of reasons. First of all, it does have, like most of the LCGs, it is fully cooperative. So in this, the core box allows you to play up to two players. Although I think you can get another core box to play up to 4. But in this setup, I am playing with a partner here. So I appreciate that aspect of this game. Essentially, you're going through in a game, you're going through trying to go through a quest deck of cards and get to the very end of the quest deck. But meanwhile, before you can get to there, you're going to have various locations coming up that you'll have to take care of. And then also, of course, as you can imagine, you're going to be dealing with a bunch of orcs and goblins and other types of enemies that you're familiar with from the movie and or books. And then you get to be the various characters that you're familiar with from Lord of the Rings, like here's the card for Legolas, and then throughout the course of the game you'll have your own unique deck of cards that are additional units that you'll get to play and play out to help you take out the bad guys that show up and also progress through that quest track. Overall, the game I think flows nicely. I like the fact that out of the box you have essentially crafted decks that you don't really have to think too much about and how to put together. But I will also say I'm actually trying to get rid of this first edition of Lord of the Rings, the card game. So if you're watching this and want to buy it from me, let me know, because I actually want to go out and eventually get that second edition of the Lord of the Rings card game, because I never really invested in the living card game from the first edition, and now that they've come out with the second edition, I do feel that I want to kind of build up a collection of the core box along with a lot of the expansions they've been releasing for the second edition to really dig in deeper with this game. So with that said, in the future, I do think this potentially could go up higher on my list if I really start to invest further in this game, get that second edition, and start to get more of the expansions that come with the card game. So with that said, Lord of the Rings, the card game, number 19 on my list. Alright, so the number 18 game on my list goes to Battlelore by Fantasy Flight Games again. So 3 for 3 with Fantasy Flight. You may see some more from here on out. But Battlelore is another Command and Color Systems tactical fighting game. And I saw Corey actually has, spoiler alert, by the way, so tune out if you don't want to hear me spoil something on Corey's list. From Corey's list, he mentions Command and Colors Napoleonics and Command and Colors Ancients, which are also Command and Colors games like Battlelore. Battlelore, as you can see, has a fantasy theme, but uses a lot of the same aspects that the other Command and Color games use, in that you have a board divided in 3 sections, and then during a game, you're going to be playing various cards that tell you where you can activate your units in what section, and therefore follows a very similar. If you've played one of those other Command and Color games, you already have a good idea of how to play this one. What I like about this Command and Colors game is the fact that you have unique scenario setups that each side will play a half of a map setup. So here are the halves of the potential setup for the blue player, and then the red player is also going to randomly choose a setup for their half of the board. And so then you end up with all these kind of unique combinations of potential scenarios, opposed to just a full scenario, which is how I think all the other Command and Colors games are played. So it's kind of an interesting element in this game. I also appreciate all the variety of kind of fantasy creatures. You get to be like this giant, I don't know what this kind of is. It looks like a rock hippo or something like that, but very thematic. And I don't know. It was a game that I think the other aspect too that I liked about this Command and Colors game was the unique different victory point opportunities, ways you can get victory points, and I think that I liked about the game, and the fact that there's these also a spell deck of cards that, in addition then to the regular command cards you can be playing throughout the game, there's also going to be these kind of powerful spell type cards or kind of powered up cards that cost points that you collect during the game, but then have a big impact on gameplay if you're able to use those. So overall, I actually do think this has the opportunity to go up higher on my list if I get it to the table more often, because I have the expansion content for a purple faction that was released, and I've yet to even play with that yet. On the other hand, there could be risk of it going lower if I start moving up other Command and Color games higher on my list, such as Memoir 44, because I recently acquired a ton of Memoir 44 content and expansion stuff, and if I start playing that more, maybe I will end up liking Memoir 44 more than Battle War. Needless to say, this is still a fun game. I still would be happy to play it with anyone, and for that reason, it is number 18 on my list. Alright, the number 17 game on my list is actually not a Fantasy Flight game, but Ascension Tactics, which is published by Stoneblade Games. Now, Ascension Tactics is a deck building tactical miniatures game based on the Ascension deck building game, and I've actually never really played the Ascension deck builder game. I'm a fan of deck builder games in general. The one that I played the most probably has been Star Realms, but any game with a deck building mechanic immediately appeals to me. I also really appreciate the Undaunted game in how they innovate with using the deck building system, which I know, spoiler alert if you don't want to hear this, but that's another game that was on Corey's list too. But what I find interesting about Ascension Tactics is it also, like in Undaunted, combines deck building with a tactical element. So on a board, you have all the characters that are representing your heroes that have all sorts of unique abilities here. So these are all the different characters that you can play with on the board. Just like in a regular game of Ascension or most other deck building games, you have your market of cards that you're acquiring during the course of the game using the currency of this game, which is the triangle symbols. So in your starting deck, you get a bunch of these apprentice cards that give you one of that currency to try to acquire these market cards, and eventually, like in any deck builder, you're building up a stronger and stronger deck of cards that will augment the abilities of the miniatures on the board, and then depending on which scenario you're playing, you're going to be moving your miniatures around to various areas, trying to accomplish objectives, and then eventually fighting with the enemy that you're playing against. One big plus for me about this game is that it comes with cooperative rules, and I can say that and solo/cooperative rules, and I played the solitaire system, and I'm extremely pleased with how fluid and simple the AI system in this game is. And it works quite well, and felt like the AI player, even though it's very fluid and simple the AI system is simple and fluid to use, I didn't feel like the AI was making dumb choices. Also, the scenario book comes with not just a bunch of different scenarios, but also a full campaign you can play through cooperatively, and I think that's fantastic. So with that said, there's a lot of upside here for this game. I know it's only at number 17 on my list, but I think it could go higher because I've yet to play the campaign for this game, and I think I'll really enjoy doing that. Also, I have to mention I already backed the expansion for this game, which I think is a standalone expansion, and it was recently on Kickstarter. I believe by this point it's no longer on Kickstarter, but that's Ascension Tactics Inferno, so I'll have even more content for this game. I just really enjoy how simple yet simple yet complex this game is in terms of how you're moving around your units and using the deck building mechanic to get cards to try to make your units on the battlefield better and better as the game goes on. So with that said, Ascension Tactics is my number 17 game. Alright, so the number 16 game on my list is one that I currently don't physically have in my collection, and that's because I used to have the first edition of this game, then sold it when I found out that they were going to kickstart a second edition of this game. And that game is Company of Heroes, the board game, which is a board game based on the IP, the PC game Company of Heroes. Now, as mentioned, I did acquire the first edition of this game, had the opportunity to play it just enough to rank it at this high of a level on my list. But when I found out about the second edition, I decided to sell it, and just because the second edition would have enough changes where I felt it justified just starting fresh with the second edition. With that said, a shameless plug here of some content on our YouTube channel. I actually did a video of a playthrough of a cooperative scenario of Company of Heroes, the board game, via Tabletop Simulator with one of the designers, Brian. So definitely check out that video if you want to learn more about this game. But as mentioned, this is a game based on a PC game. And I'm already a big fan of a lot of different types of RTS PC games. So when I found out they were going to make a board game version of the Company of Heroes World War II themed RTS tactical fighting board game or computer game, it was immediately caught my interest. And when I learned more about how the board game played, I knew I needed to back the game, and I was not disappointed when I finally got it in the mail. In short, this is a very, I would say, lighter weight World War II tactical game. It's a hex-based game. I'll go back to the video of me playing it on YouTube here. It's a hex-based tactical World War II game. You're moving units when it's your turn. What's nice about this game and why I have it high on my list is the pace of play is very quick. Because you're just moving, you only have, I think, 3 or 4 movements, we'll say, per turn, and then your opponent goes, and that makes the gameplay very streamlined. And then combat is all deterministic. You're not rolling dice or anything like that, like you do in many other tactical games. So that's another reason why I find it kind of a unique tactical fighting World War II game. The other big aspect of this game that I really appreciated was the fact it had solo and cooperative rules already with the game built in. And a lot of tactical World War II games do not have solitaire or cooperative systems, especially a cooperative system. There's definitely some good tactical soloable World War II tactical games out there, but nothing that I'm aware of that really has good, solid cooperative system. So what's going for this game to make it higher on my list is the fact that I haven't received the second edition yet. I know that they've made a few rule changes to make gameplay even better. And I'll just want to get this game to the table more often and hopefully actually play it with more people. So definitely just by sheer getting this game to the table, it might go higher on my list. What potentially will hold it back is the fact that even though this is a board game based on a computer game that has a single player campaign, and that the board game does have a solitaire rule system incorporated into the board game, there is no single player campaign or solitaire campaign that comes with the board game. And in fact, the scenarios in general are all rather bland. There are different map layouts, and there are plenty of different factions to choose from, and a bunch of different leaders, all with unique abilities. So there's a lot of variety in the gameplay per se, but the scenarios are all about the same. There's not a lot of unique objectives that you can, that make one game different from the next. It's typically just the typical skirmish match type of mode of play that is no different than probably the video game. But I just figured there'd be a nice, well thought out single player campaign for the board game, and that doesn't exist. So that disappoints me a little bit and may go lower on my list. Increase in number. But maybe then, on the other hand, they'll add expansion in the future that does introduce a solitaire / cooperative campaign that you can play with a friend, and I think that'd be fantastic. And this game is already designed for that to be easily incorporated in the future if the publisher wants to do that. So with that said, my number 16 game is Company of Heroes, the board game. Alright, so the number 15 game on my list goes to Warfighter World War II by DBG Games. Now, this is what I'm showing on the table here today is the Pacific version of Warfighter World War II, but I also do have the European version of the game, which is very similar to this Pacific version, and I would say either could be in the 15th spot on my list. With that said, Warfighter World War II is a solo or cooperative World War II tactical fighting game in which you are picking out a mission and then objective to play, and then also determining the different weapons and soldiers that you'll bring with you on your mission, and then you will meticulously go and discover location after location by playing these location marker cards, fighting off the enemy as they the enemy forces as they appear as you explore these locations. What I appreciate about the game is all the different flavor and variety and theme in the game. So, for example, when you're equipping your soldiers with the weapons, you have a lot of options to choose from. In this case, a trusty M1 submachine gun, a pistol, and a grenade. There's also flamethrowers and bazookas and rocket launchers and all sorts of fun things. The soldiers themselves also have a bunch of different types of abilities and skills that make them unique. And then there's equipment as well, like bandages to help heal your soldiers. The locations are all very thematic and unique. So you have like a clearing and a muddy slope and heavy jungle. It really makes you feel, at least in this case, for the Pacific version of Warfighter World War II, that you're in, the islands of the Southeast Asia. Then of course you have the enemies themselves that will be spawning, and there's a lot of variety there. So you have the machine gun crew, you have commanders that can bring in additional enemies, you have snipers that can hurt you from far away, and mortar teams, and there's even vehicles that you might encounter. So a lot of different variety and flavor in the enemies, and then the locations, and then the missions and objectives themselves. So in terms of the mission for this specific scenario I have set up, I have this rapid raid, which defines some various starting aspects and restrictions in terms of the guys I can have and resources I can use. And then the objective, which is this supply hut, which is basically a destruction objective where I'm trying to blow up some supply huts. And those then will dictate the types of or soldiers I'll bring in and the types of equipment. Combat is dice system. I think it works nicely. It's quick and easy to pick up and understand. There's even this little combat chart that summarizes the results of the dice that you roll, and a lot of other good reference charts on the game board. So it's a game that once you read through the rule book, it plays through fairly quickly. So the big part of why I enjoy this game is the theme. It does feel like you're fighting in, even though it's a linear map, it does really feel like you're fighting a mission in World War II. You really start caring about your soldiers. They all have names, like this is a PFC Fred Schwartz. I don't know what PFC stands for, so I'm not a military expert. This guy is just named Greason, but as you play the game, you'll of course call them by their names, and maybe you'll come up with nicknames for your soldiers while you're playing the game based on whether they're doing well or not. I do want to point out too, shameless plug for additional content on the Talking Cardboard YouTube channel. I have a full playthrough of this game with one of the designers, so definitely check that video out because it's a perfect example of why I appreciate this game. There's a climactic ending to my playthrough that was completely unplanned. It involves a Tiger tank that I'm trying to blow up. I don't want to spoil it for you because I want you to check out the video, but it really illustrates why this game does this great job of telling a story every time you're playing it. With that said, the one aspect that kind of concerns me for the longevity of this game, keep staying high on my list, is the lack of a robust campaign system. Now, in the original World War II European version of Pacific World War II Warfighter World War II European version of the game, there was no campaign really at all. With the Pacific version that they brought in later, they did add these one-pager kind of campaign sheets that spell out some aspects to kind of direct you to how you can kind of simulate a campaign of, in this case, the Tarawa offensive defines which objectives to use, what kind of locations to use, other different aspects to kind of other restrictions, basically to kind of make it seem like that you're fighting the Tarawa offensive. I just didn't think it was a robust enough campaign system. I was hoping it would even be a little more prescriptive than what is spelled out on these one-pagers, but I appreciate the effort. My hope is in the future maybe they'll introduce a more robust kind of campaign expansion for Warfighter World War II and the European version as well. But for the time being, there's still a lot of content that I've yet to explore. There's a tank expansion that I have that I've not really utilized, and there's other different types of mission styles that I have yet to play through as well, like island, think beach invasion type missions, or paradropping missions, I think is another type that I have the content for, but I haven't tried out yet. A lot of other reasons that make this game unique from any other in my collection, and for all those reasons, I still feel it justifiably holds a number 15 position in my top games of all time. All right, so the number 14 game on my list is Madara Unintentional Malum Act 1 by Succubus Publishing. This is a cooperative dungeon crawler board game for up to 4 players and has a heavily inspired JRPG/anime theme to it. Now, this is a massive game that I'm not going to be able to cover everything right now, but if you want to learn more about this game, please check out my playthrough video on our Talking Cardboard YouTube channel, where I play through the first mission of this game, because there is just, like I said, a lot that's going on. As you can see here, I set up the first mission on the table to illustrate the various characters that you'll be playing. They're all asymmetric. They each have a whole variety of equipment and weapons and disciplines, which are these little cards, which are essentially like your skills. And here's kind of a close-up of one of the weapons, a war axe for this Remy character. They have armor, which in this case for Remy it's an occult shirt. These core cards, which are like items and accessories, and then like I said, there's these little small cute ability or discipline cards, which allow your characters to do various things. And then you have the campaign book itself, which is this massive, I don't know how many 100 pages are in here, but there's a lot of there's a lot of paragraphs, a lot of content in the campaign. So that's a huge part of the game itself, is just the story, let alone the gameplay. On a player, just like a traditional dungeon crawler game, you'll go through the campaign book. Eventually you'll have encounters, and then you'll set the encounter up as described in the campaign book. You lay out your characters on the board. Enemies will spawn via various means while you play through the mission. Then each character has a turn based on the initiative track, and on a character's turn, you simply check to see how much stamina they have, which are these red dots on their character card. And then that kind of correlates to action points. And the main actions you'll be taking are moving and attacking, not surprisingly, but there's definitely plenty of other things you'll be able to do as well. And I do really appreciate the combat system. In the case of, let's say, this Nightingale character, if she was about to do an attack, you just look at her 2 or however many combat weapon cards she has equipped. In this case, the long sword, and then this magic talisman, and then you just look at the colored dice that they each are using. So the longsword uses a white die, the talisman uses a purple die. You grab the die from your die pool, and then you roll them. Actually, it's a bad result. Higher is always better, but you then take the attack value of the dice, and then you look at the enemy you're attacking. Let's just say in this case she's attacking the Cave Sickle. See how much defense you have to beat. In this case, she didn't beat the defense, so then the attack would have been a miss. But if she did overcome the attack or the defense of the enemy, then you deal damage. There's a lot more to the combat system than just that, but it's pretty straightforward and yet has a lot of variety to it, because there's a lot of other aspects I didn't just touch on that make combat unique. When it is then the enemy's turn, or the AI system's turn, each enemy unit has its own AI card, and these are very straightforward. It's a simple flow chart. You go top to bottom and resolve the enemy's action based on these if, and, or statements for that enemy. And once you go through the whole initiative track, you take the initiative cards, shuffle them, and lay them out again for the next round. Rinse and repeat until you complete the objective of that encounter. And that in a nutshell is how this game plays. There's so much I didn't cover. There's the fact you can upgrade your weapons and items. There's the fact that you have a whole different skill discipline or skill tree that you can progress throughout a campaign. There's loot that you're finding in different tiers of these various items that you'll be using. But these are all reasons why I love this game. There's so much variety. Everything also, to me, I mean, the rules are not simple by any means. It's about a 60-page rule book right here that you'll have to grok through, so keep that in mind. But I did find the rules after I read through the rule book pretty clear and concise, and everything more or less made sense to me. And there is a lot of upside for this game in the future of my list. I definitely think it could go higher once I start to play it more. I have Act 2 and Act 3 for this game on their way at some point, and I've yet to really dig into Act 1. But even though I've only played really one mission of this game, it was enough. It had a positive enough impact to put it at number 14 on my list. In terms of things that might send it back, I can't. There's nothing short term I could see causing me to lower this game on my list. The only thing that I do want to say is it's a table hog. As you can see, this is one of those lifestyle games. This is probably one of the smaller missions because it's only 3 map tiles, and the game comes with dozens of map tiles that you'll be using. There's going to be a lot of upkeep for your various characters as they gain items and gain discipline, and it can probably get pretty overwhelming pretty quickly. Not much different than Gloomhaven. If you've ever played Gloomhaven, I find this game much better, or for me, much more interesting than Gloomhaven. I've played the digital version of Gloomhaven, which people say, oh, that's not the same as the board game, but I will deduce that they're similar enough where I know I wouldn't like the board game any better than the digital version. Whereas with Madara, this game just is right up my alley. I love the combats, the dice system for combat. I love how your character turns work. I love how simple and straightforward the AI and the enemies work. So, and I do appreciate the story that I read so far, even though, again, it was like one chapter of the campaign book, but I really appreciated the writing of this game, which is, of course, a big part of any big campaign that you're getting into, or dungeon crawler type game, is if the story is good. So, for all those reasons, that is why I have Madara at number 14 on my list of top board games. All right, so the number 13 game in my list goes to The Fires of Midway, Carrier Battles of 1942 by Clash of Arms Games. This is a competitive Pacific Theater World War II game, kind of card-based combat game, pitting one player as a Japanese against another player who represents the United States naval forces in the Pacific Theater. And the goal of the game is simply to reach a victory point threshold before your opponent does, and that's achieved by destroying your opponent's carriers and then also destroying aircraft that are being sent from your opponent's carrier to your carriers. And I won't go into a lot of detail on how this game works because, in fact, I already have a very detailed rules explanation video on the Talking Cardboard YouTube channel, so please check that out if you want to learn more about how this game plays. In the meantime, I'll give you a very quick overview. Essentially, here we have the setup of a game of Fires of Midway. The Japanese players on this side with their 2 carriers, the Junyo and the Akagi, and then I, as the American players, have my carriers, the Enterprise and the Saratoga, and then these carriers are represented on this map of the ocean, Pacific Ocean. So during the course of the game, you might move your carrier tokens around and try to either get closer or further away from your opponent's carriers. You have your victory point track here, and then there's these combat cards that you'll be drawing when you are attacking your opponent's planes and carriers. And then each carrier, besides having a carrier card, which is used to keep track of the damage of the carrier that they acquire over time, but also the carriers then have the planes themselves that are aboard that you'll be sending at your enemy carriers. So you have for the U.S., the Dauntless bomber planes, you have the Wildcat fighter planes, and then you have the Devastator torpedo planes. And during your turn, you can decide which of your planes aboard that carrier you want to send after your enemy carriers. And then There will potentially be an air-to-air combat round if the enemy carrier has a combat air patrol in the air. And then after that air-to-air combat, you'll have the air-to-carrier combat and trying to resolve either the success of a bomber attack or torpedo attack against the enemy carrier in the hopes that you cause damage to lower the damage track of your opponent's carrier. And that, in a nutshell, is how this game works. There's definitely a few more rules and aspects of the game, but overall that gives you a good sense of the flow of how it works. And in terms of why it's number 13 on my list, first and foremost, I think it's just the theme really comes out in this game, for me at least. I really did feel like I was an admiral. In the case of, one of the cards you can be is Admiral Halsey. So I genuinely kind of felt like Admiral Halsey, managing my carriers, managing which planes I want to send out, when I want to send them out. Do I want to instead keep my planes back and repair my carriers? All of that felt thematic to me. And also I just appreciated how the combat system worked. There's of course the luck aspect because you are rolling dice. But then you also have these combat cards that augment your die rolls, and these are kind of like an important resource. You have to decide if you want to use them or hold on to them for other combat in the future. So that's a fun decision to have to make. And overall, the game was relatively accessible as well. My dad was actually able to play this game with me, and he enjoyed himself. And typically, he's not one to play heavy board games. So the fact he kind of got into this was, I think, a good signal that this is a relatively accessible board game, especially when it comes to World War II themed games. So for all those reasons, it definitely felt like it deserved a number 13 spot on my list. And in terms of the upside for this game, one thing that I've yet to really explore is in the rule book, there's these solitaire rules. And also there's several other scenarios that I at some point would like to try. So I think those aspects of this game will make me enjoy it more than I have so far. On the flip side of that, I am a little worried this game could get kind of stale over time. Whether you're, even though there are scenarios, and I think they probably definitely will feel a little different from one to another. At the end of the day, the mechanics don't really change a lot if you're playing with one carrier, two carriers, three carriers, and however many planes on each carrier. You're making more or less the same decisions. The gameplay probably isn't going to change a whole lot. The map for this game is extremely simple. There are some storm tokens that might come out, and clouds that might come out on the map during the course of the game, but that doesn't really affect gameplay too much. So I don't know over the long term if this game will have enough variety in it to continue to make me want to come back to play it opposed to the other games in my collection. But for the time being, I definitely think this game is deserving of the 13th spot that I have it currently on my list of top games. Alright, the number 12 game on my list is Star Wars Armada by Fantasy Flight Games. Star Wars Armada is a Star Wars themed tabletop miniature war game pitting the Imperial fleet against the Rebel fleet, allowing players to take control of some of the most iconic ships from the original Star Wars trilogy, including the Imperial Star Destroyer, the Corvette, the Nebulon B frigate, and in a game of Armada, your objective is simply to destroy the enemy ships before they destroy you. Now, one of the main reasons why I really enjoy this game and why it's so high on my list is because Fantasy Flight really hit the nail on the head with the theme of this game. It really feels like a legitimate Star Wars, huge scale fleet battle, because the ships all feel weighted correctly. The Imperial destroyers are just much stronger and have way more defense than the Rebel fleet and the Rebel capital ships specifically. And meanwhile, squadron combat against capital ships is almost negligible, which seems right. But squadrons are still really important because they're really good against enemy squadrons. And if you leave your enemy squadrons not in check, they eventually will wear down the capital ships over time. So you do, there's this great balance there. I really appreciate how the combat system in Armada works. So, for example, in this case, we have this, we'll say this Imperial Star Destroyer is about to unload its armament on this, the Corvette. So you'd look at the range roller to determine what range it's at, and then you would look at the ship card for the ship that's attacking and cross-reference the hull that's attacking from. In this case, it's the front, so you then roll the colored dice that's listed on the diagram, which is 3 black and 3 red, and you just find your trusty dice tray and roll the dice and resolve the symbols that you rolled. And the defending ship does have the opportunity to try to defend itself and mitigate the damage, but whatever damage does get through, you then have to take somehow. And first you have these shields that you'll be ticking down until they're at 0. And once your shields are at 0, then you actually have to start taking hull damage until your ship eventually will blow up. So I really think the combat system is relatively streamlined. It has a lot of flavor and interest. There's a lot of interesting aspects to it, so I really like that part of the game as well. And then the game looks beautiful. So if you haven't noticed, these capital ships are extremely well done. They come painted and assembled. No different than the X-Wing, Star Wars X-Wing miniature game, if you're familiar with that at all. The squadrons, unfortunately, aren't painted, but they then are a great art project at home if you're into painting minis. So I'm kind of proud of the artwork that I've done on my minis, although they could still be better probably. But nonetheless, the game looks great on the table. In terms of this game staying high on my list, there's still plenty of opportunity for me to explore this game. First and foremost, I have this giant Superstar Destroyer expansion I've yet to take out of its shrink wrap. And then I also have these campaign expansions that I haven't even used. So, and a lot of other expansions I've yet to use, which not only then introduce new ships, but all these new upgrade cards, which didn't really touch on, but all of these capital ships can have unique upgrades. So there's a lot of variability in this game. But there's a few things that I do have concerns with. First of all, the fact that I don't think the first edition is really being actively supported. Eventually, all these miniature games seem to switch over to second edition rules, and all the ship cards then are updated so that things are rebalanced and everything. I've kind of stopped collecting any new wave stuff for the Armada. I'm pretty content with the collection I have, and John from Talking Cardboard also has a very significant Armada collection, so that's not a huge problem for me, but something that's annoying nonetheless. Another aspect that has frustrated me about this game is they've never released official scenarios. I think there's so much opportunity for really interesting scenarios where the starting locations of all the ships are defined, the types of ships are all defined, and unique objective is defined. But instead, this game just has these kind of generic objective cards that provide some guidelines to add some variability to the gameplay, but most of the time you're just trying to destroy enemy ships. So that could be an expansion in the future, but I doubt that will ever happen. And then last but not least, Armada is a competitive game by nature, and that's fine, but I do have Star Trek Alliance on my Calyx shelf. That's a game I've yet to play, but Star Trek Alliance is also a tabletop space-themed miniature war game that is cooperative and has a whole AI system, AI activation system developed. And I could see myself getting more into that game at some point in the future than Armada, because I really would rather play this game cooperatively with a friend than against someone. Now, again, just like with scenarios, maybe there could be an expansion in the future that introduces an AI system for Armada, but doubtful that will happen. However, like I was saying, there's still plenty of content left for me to explore for Armada, and for those reasons, that's why I have Armada as number 12 on my list of top games. Alright, so the number 11 game on my list is Heavy Steam, published by Greenbrier Games. Heavy Steam is a competitive 2 to 4 player game that has a steampunk theme, if not obvious by the artwork on this box. And in this game, it's essentially a tactical combat game where players are controlling these giant mechanized titans that are powered by steam, trying to destroy the enemy titan before getting destroyed themselves. And meanwhile, a big part of this game is this steam economy that you're managing for your titan. So if we want to take a closer look here, this is an example of a Titan board with all these white cubes representing the steam that's powering your Titan. And in short, if you want to do something with your Titan, you need to have the steam cubes available to do that action. For example, if you want to move, you need to have steam cubes down in the feet area of your Titan to do a move action. If you want to fire with a weapon, you need to have steam cubes over to your weapons to use them to make an attack. If you want to use your other accessories that provide other benefits, you need to have steam in those. And as you can imagine, you only have so much steam coming in every round to be able to do only so many different things. Also, as you can imagine, you're going to be taking attacks from your opponent's Titan, and as you take attacks, you're going to be filling up your cube spots with these black damage cubes that can't really be moved very easily. That as they crowd up your spaces, you're going to have more or less opportunity to use some of your different weapons and movement because of those damage cubes being in the way. Now, there's also these blue cubes that are your shield cubes that can help mitigate the damage that you're taking, but over time you're eventually going to take too much damage and start filling up those spaces with the black cubes. Now, if you ever do want to do an attack and you have the steam cubes in the weapon to do that, all you do is you look at the weapon chart, determine the range of the enemy Titan you're shooting at, and then you roll that many dice. So within 0 to 1 range, it's saying I would roll 4 red dice. You roll the dice, and then the enemy potentially was going to be rolling some blue defense dice, and then you simply see if your attack goes through. If you roll more hits than the your opponent rolled defense dice, and then deal a damage accordingly. So that, in a nutshell, is how Heavy Steam works. Throughout the course of the game, there also is movement, so you'll be moving your Titans back and forth on this one-dimensional map. And also there's other small units that might come into play, like these infantry and mobile artillery units that can attack and move as well. There is a little bit of a card economy too, so during the course of the game you'll have the opportunity to purchase these cards, and they each have unique effects, such as adding these units to the board. Also, there's these terrain cards that simulate the terrain that your Titan might currently be on in the game map, and then other one-time use event cards that could have an impact as well. Now, why is this game number 11 on my list? It really comes down to the innovation of merging a tactical combat game with this Steam economy game. And it's almost like 2 games merged into one in my mind that work together flawlessly. I really appreciate the theming of this game. I think it works very well. I really like the strategic choices I'm making on my Titan board with the Steam cubes, and seeing how that plays out then on the big board. And sometimes you're going to have to sacrifice combat for movement, or do you want to try to do another focus on moving first and then trying to do an attack? And when you do an attack, you use up a decent amount of steam cubes, so you're not going to probably be able to attack again right away. So you have to plan ahead and kind of also at the same time guess what your opponent's going to be trying to do as well. If you think your opponent is currently kind of in a defensive situation, maybe now is the time to press them, but maybe you feel that they're about to attack you, and therefore you want to make sure you have cubes in good defensive situations. So there's a lot of strategy in how you're manipulating your steam cubes, and I really appreciate how the design of this game is kind of combining 2 elements that you don't really see in games very often. In fact, I don't know of another game like this that exists, so that's why it's so high on my list. In terms of the longevity of this game staying high on my list, I will be the first to admit I definitely want to play this game more. I haven't had a lot of plays of this game up until now. And the reason it's high on my list is more just because of the fact I just know it's a unique theme and the mechanics are unique. Not so much that I've played this game a lot and I really enjoy playing it. So, with that said, if I do get to play this game more and I really enjoy playing the game, maybe it will start going higher on my list than where it's currently at. Now, on the flip side, this game unfortunately has been out of print for many years, and doesn't seem to ever get. I don't think it's ever going to be supported again by at least Greenbrier. So with that said, the content that exists for this game is very limited. It's just the core game, and then I think they released 1 or 2 small expansions. So once you've played this game several times, you're going to start. You'll probably have seen then all the weapons that you have, all the different pilots, and then there's only a handful of Titans, and you might start to get tired of the core content of the game, which of course then naturally is going to, make one less likely to play a game that they feel that they've already kind of explored everything in. So that is kind of the downside, unfortunately, for this game. But for the time being, like I said, still have plenty of game gameplay opportunity for this game, given what I do have and have yet to play with. So with that said, because of its innovative design and the merging of the steam mechanic as well as then just a tactical combat game, I felt Heavy Steam deserved the 11th spot on my list. Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching my top 20 through 11. I know the scenery has changed a little bit, but don't worry about that. Because soon, John, Corey, and I will be uploading our combined top 10 through 1 list. And we'll probably break it up into 2 different videos just because there'll be a lot of different games we'll be talking about. So stay tuned for that. We're all really pumped and excited to share with you what games we think are the best. So hope to see you guys again soon. Thank you.